Well, violent clashes are worsening in Venezuela.
Anti-government protests are spreading across that nation. Hundreds have been injured and dozens have died.
Virginia Lopez is a journalist in Caracas, Venezuela. She joins us now with the latest. Can you tell us why these protests are happening now?
Well, there's been a growing sense of discontent towards the government. This has certainly been the case from 3 years ago, but it's probably reaching a boiling point at the moment, not only because the economic situation is dire. There's a chronic shortage of food and medicines and just the most basic items that you can imagine, but also the spark that sort of set this new wave of protest alight was the decision by the Supreme Court to strip the opposition-led National Assembly of its power. This caused a great deal of indignation and also sparked the first protest almost 6 weeks ago.
And is there a sense, Virginia, as to what led to this crisis?
It's hard to tell at the moment. There's been a growing sense of indignation that only seems to be exacerbated by the refusal of the government to acknowledge that there's a problem, but also by the increased number of deaths. So it almost has been snowballing. One event seems to follow another one, and people here are undeterred. I've seen this wave of protest 2 years ago, and at the time, the protests kept on getting smaller. On this occasion, they just keep on getting bigger, and people seem to be more resolute that they're not going to abandon the streets and that this must continue until there's a change of government or until the government calls for elections.
It seems like the government is portraying the opposition here as terrorists. Is that why this demonstration has become so violent? Because they're not going to take that? And once these became deadly protests, I can't believe that they're still so out of control. What is leading to the violence being escalated?
Well, certainly the fact that the government has, like I said, has neglected to understand that the discontent is widespread has fueled greater anger. It's not rare for the government to dismiss protests by saying that the opposition is packed with terrorists. But what's different this time around is that people are not only angry at the government, so that there's a political crisis, there's also a huge crisis at within the health sector. Illnesses that have been long eradicated, like malaria, are having a huge comeback. Just to give you a sense of how grave this problem is, Venezuela was one of the 3 countries to eradicate malaria back in the 70s. It is now one of the 3 countries where malaria is having a comeback. This type of dire situation is just repeated all along the board, not only in the health sector, but in the economy. The crime rate here is soaring. So what you're seeing is a juxtaposition of crises that are just basically translating into a growing discontent and more civilians joining in on these protests.
I think what's interesting here is that in this country, sometimes in the United States I'm talking about now, is that when these types of protests erupt, where there's violence, there are 2 sides. One side says in support, and the other side says this is getting totally ridiculous and out of hand, and starts blaming the protesters. From what I've been reading, it seems that the people of Venezuela are really supporting those who are going out and protesting, even bringing things like food and water to kind of fuel the protests to keep going.
Well, what you have to understand is that the government is now it has a support of perhaps a little below 20%. So these young protesters, which are definitely a sort of stable feature of the protest, have earned a lot of the support from the people. They're very much seen as like the young, fresh generation that is somehow fighting back the security forces. These have been, for the most part, peaceful, but end up always, it seems that there's a pattern where towards the end of the protest, there's clashes between security forces that throw tear gas canisters and these young men and women who basically return the tear gas canisters. But it's been rare to see firepower, and it's been rare to see that the protesters are the ones that originally or the first ones to be aggressive towards the security forces. So of course it's been, like you say, it's been amazing to see how much support these young men have been garnering. You're seeing a huge mobilization, not only to give them a almost ridiculous cardboard shields, because of course a cardboard shield isn't necessarily going to help you when security forces are firing at you with rubber bullets. But what you are seeing is this sort of general public sentiment of wanting to support each other and somehow look for a way out of this huge crisis.
Yeah, it's not clear exactly what that way out might be. Virginia Lopez, we want to thank you, who's joining us from Caracas, Venezuela.
Thank you.